I want to lead with this question for you here. Why do you think it is why do you think it is that lack of trust, while having such a huge impact, can be so hard to identify? Because you're working with so many employers, particularly on employee opinion and engagement surveys, and really just identifying that, hey, a lack of trust, which we just agreed is actually trust, is hard to identify.
So this is something I am working with a lot of our employers on. And I think it is hard to identify because it's not something we talk about, right? If we don't have trust, we're not going to go to our supervisor and say, I don't trust you. It's going to come out in different behaviors. And I'm kind of watching the polls come in. And I think the people listening kind of get it, right? Like if we don't have open communication, if we don't have this safety in the workplace, then we're not going to have trust. And that shows up as different behaviors in the way that we work. And this isn't like one area of the organization. I'm working with a lot of leadership teams that are struggling with this, and there's lots of reasons for it. One is just that we went through a lot of change in the last few years, and typical onboarding practices that we used to have, getting to know one another. We've just changed the way that we approach work. And so the intentionality we have to bring increases to bring awareness to, do we really have trust among our teams and within our organization?
When you're working with an organization, how does an environment that doesn't have high trust start to present itself to you? What are the signs that you see when you're working with them that say, this might be that we have a trust issue?
Well, I think there's a lot of leading indicators. Retention can be one of those things if you're constantly turning people over. I think engagement, and what I often hear is, I don't know what's wrong. I just know we need help. That is the lead-in conversation. Can you come in and help us evaluate what's going on? And of course, I am the survey person. I love surveys. And the way this starts to come out on this survey is we ask a question: do you think executive leadership will do anything with this survey? Well, I look at that question because if
Well,
employees say,
that's a blinking trust right now, isn't it?
exactly, right. And what I think is so important is I feel like employees are saying, I'm being a little bit vulnerable filling out this survey. And it feels uncomfortable because I don't even know if anybody is going to pay attention. And that to me is always what I want to go in and fix. Phil, when I think even what's below trust, I think about expectations. And so often you've heard me say on the show, we have to get clear on expectations. And I heard a formula once, and I use this a lot in when I'm coaching leaders, and that is disappointment is expectation divided by reality. And I've kind of edited that to say that it's expectation divided by perceived reality. And so often I think in our organizations, we make promises through the recruiting department, or we give a bonus one year, and for lots of reasons, we can't give the bonus the next year, but we don't go back and reestablish those expectations. We don't invest the time to recalibrate those expectations. And sometimes that's what I see leads to a lack of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just checking. Nick, am I still with you guys here? Because everything here flashed. Yep. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we got
It's just your brilliance, Phil. It was your brilliance flashing.
A flash of brilliance. All right. Hey, I'll take a flash. Sometimes that's all I might have.
I look like a flash today. I don't know why I'm so highlighted, but look at that. It was me. I flashed.
Tanya, when a lot of times when we're dealing with teams, and I know you work a lot with manufacturers, and manufacturing environments, have a persona about them, a stigma about them. It's going to be a rough, gruff environment. That's not always the case, but sometimes, I hear leaders when they're talking, like, there's a lot of frustration around the word trust. There's, being vulnerable in the workplace, and leaders, I'm hearing them say, I just want people to come to work and do their job. That's not necessarily in conflict with each other, but in today's workforce, vulnerability, trust, we're working to create engagement. We all have concerns of retention. I mean, these aren't things that we did not have any of these conversations 30 years ago when I started, and I was in manufacturing. If I went and said, hey, people, they want to feel vulnerable at work today. I mean, what is that all about, from your experience in working with leaders?
Well, I mean, I think we have to credit Brene Brown right now. She's made an indelible impact on the workforce. But I think the reason she has is because it rings true. And so this idea of I just want you to show up and do your work, and I've talked about this before. We, started as an agrarian society, right? And everybody knew their role. They knew what they did. They passed on that learning. And then we went into like this factory setting. Now we're in an information of intellect. And even in manufacturing, there's people that, outside of work, the things they're doing and all of that. And so this idea of bringing your whole person to work is really
Yeah.
making an impact, even in the corners in the marketplaces where it's like, I just need you to come in and do your job. Because at the end of the day, that person is giving up something else that they could be doing to coming into work. And so when we think about why teams don't function, and especially in manufacturing, this may not be corporate wide, this might be your team, right? Are my supplies set up right? Are my tools here where I need them? Because I'm going to get graded on my production level. Do I have what I need when I walk in the door? And
Yeah.
what we see in teams is if those baseline things just aren't taken care of, then we don't have trust. And the table group talks about this and they say, the absence of trust is the biggest dysfunction of teams. And if you want to be able to fix that, that's where you have to start. It's the foundation. And unfortunately, the only way we're going to get to trust is through vulnerability. And that might look different in manufacturing culture, but it still is equally as important.
Absolutely. And I know one of the models that you do like to use is Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I think the absence of trust, as you say, that is, one of the top 5. When you're working with an organization, what are some of the things they do to start improving trust? Like
Well,
where do you find that they start sometimes?
yeah, I think it's not formulaic. I think you have to understand what the barriers are to trust, and that takes real conversations. When I'm going and working with groups, I meet individually with the leaders. I create an environment of trust with them so that they can be vulnerable with me and share that. And then once we really understand what's happening, and it's different for every single organization, but if I have to pick a theme, it's misalignment with expectations. Is that our values, right? I
Going
joined the
back to your
company.
formula, right?
Right. Yeah. I try to go back to that, but it's the values, right? Did I come in with an expectation that we were in an innovative company, that we were going to do these things in the marketplace, and now we're not doing them? Well, then I have skills that I want to bring into the workplace and they're not being, utilized. That could be trust. Maybe there was a promotion promised along the way and we had to draw that back for some reason. And I didn't get a clear expectation. And then the other thing I see is we're just hurting, I think, as a people. I don't think we're trusting inside our workplaces, outside our workplaces. I don't think there's anywhere we can go in society and be like, we have great trust here. And what I'm seeing that's showing up in the workplace is people don't take things at face value often, and especially in a toxic workplace. So much energy is spent going, well, he said XYZ, but are we sure he doesn't mean ABC? And why did he include this person in the conversation? Or why did this happen? And I'm seeing this a lot, especially at the leadership
Yeah.
across all realms of organizations. And I think that's, as leaders, we need to be investing time getting to know our teams. If you're a supervisor, talk to your teams. If you're on that manufacturing floor, hey, how are things going? Do you have what you need? And having those conversations and really allowing safe communication is the only way you're going to build trust.
Yeah. And I think it's really having that conversation in a way that the receiver is needing the conversation. And that's the skill
Yes.
enhancement opportunities for those of us who are responsible for creating and enhancing trust in the workplace. Hey, can we, Nick, can we pull up some of the survey results? I'd love to get Tanya's take on those, and Bert can jump in as well, because I am sure he's never finding himself in any legal discussions due to a lack of trust. That's for sure.
Yeah, just yesterday.
Yeah. All right. So Tanya, we can see here poor communications. We kind of reference this. It's leading the way, and trust issues might be an outcome of poor communications in and of itself. But I mean, those first 3 are really, those are high scores when we start to get into that level. toxic behavior, trust issues, poor communications. We see communications, even in our best organizations, still sometimes as very low scores. It's something that's really difficult to get right. You got any other takes on this you would add to it?
Well, I think if you looked at those top three, what it all requires is leaning into difficult conversations. And I don't know if you're in parentship or partnership or relationship, but it's not easy to lean into difficult conversations. And so often what we find when we dig deeper in communication at work, we're avoiding the conversations that are tricky. And that's where employees are telling us we have poor communication. And so I think everyone, unless you never have an argument at home and you've got this communication nailed down, I think we all have room for growth to learn how do we acquire those skills to communicate even through times of conflict.
Yeah, and I think that's supported by the graph here that Nick is showing. Effective communications is probably the thing we can do. And I know having difficult conversations, assertive communications, these are some of our top programs that people attend at AIM, whether they're live online or they're in person. And, you talked about like even in a family, and I think about when we have something in our family we need to talk about, we collaborate on how is the best way to approach that with another family member. How do we do that in a way to have the best outcome we could have? It's not usually one person running off and just attacking the issue however they feel is necessary. It's usually pretty strategic. And I know in the workplace you would want it to be that same way. If you're talking about performance reviews or you're talking about just some general feedback that people are expecting, it's really talking with your HR professional, talking with your peer group to understand how do we deliver this message in a way that we get our point across, but we also get collaboration, understanding, and we build trust in that space. And too often I've seen in every workplace I've been a part of, including the one here at AIM from time to time, where someone just has an emotion and then they go and react. And it never gives us the outcome that we're really looking for. And I'm ashamed to say I do that myself. There's times I just get frustrated and it's like, here it comes, right?
Yeah.
Here it comes. And if I would, follow my own advice that I would give of sitting back, pausing, talking, discovering what's the best way to express what my concerns are, I probably approach it a very, very different way.
Well, let's give ourselves grace. We're not all perfect. We all have these moments of doing it. I think the good mantra to remember is soft on the person, hard on the problem. And really getting clear before you lean into those conversations about what is it we're trying to solve and how, instead of sitting across from one another, can we come beside each other, just like you said, and work on this strategically. Identify what the problem is, wrap it in your values and how the actions that you're going to take support the values of your organization or your family, and then move forward in communication, in grace, because really, it's important. Everybody has a passion at work. This is part of me. It's part of my identity. Leaders of the organization also feel like it's part of their identity and what they want to accomplish. And so the more that we can get through the conflict, the more effective we're going to be. We build trust in the process. And honestly, we get more engagement and more productivity out of our teams.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.